Our gospel reading comes from Matthew, the 5th chapter, beginning with the first verse. And as alluded to with the children, we hear the Sermon on the Mount, the part that is called the Beatitudes. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." The gospel of Jesus Christ. Thanks be to God. We have a problem, not just here at St. Mark's, but Christians throughout the world, particularly in our country. And our problem is we are afraid of becoming fools. Do you sometimes worry about looking foolish? Do you worry that you might say something or act in a certain way that's going to bring ridicule to you? Think about in your workplace, or if you're retired when you were working, or if you're retired now, maybe you're not as up to date with understanding all the technology, particularly when it deals with computers or software or operating your iPhone. And it's embarrassing sometimes, speaking as one who knows, when you can't figure something out and you got a 10-year-old child saying, "Oh, I can do that." Thank you. I don't like feeling foolish. I don't particularly like not knowing or being on top of things. But one of the issues that we all have to accept if we are disciples of Jesus Christ is we have to be willing to become fools for Christ. What's that mean? Well, like I shared about not being the most technologically savvy person, it means not being afraid to admit that and not being afraid to go ask for help, be it a 10-year-old child or someone else, when I can't figure something out. Being a fool for Christ further means that we're going to live and follow a way of being in life that's not dictated by the world, but is dictated by God's calling us, by God giving us the means to be disciples. See, Paul, in his letter to the 1 Corinthians, as he opens it, starts talking about the foolishness of what we are about. Us sitting here, us claiming something beyond the world's understanding, we are foolish in terms of the world's understanding. Because what we are promoting, what we are advocating makes no sense to most people in the world. What are we proclaiming? That Jesus Christ is our Savior, that Jesus is the Son of God, that Jesus is God appearing amongst us, and that we are to accept his teachings and way of being and to live that way, not being dictated to by the world. Well, as Paul said, we're accused of foolishness by the intelligent, by the Greeks. And that day the Greeks were still known for their knowledge, for their philosophy, for their ability to observe things in nature and make deductions by what they had seen, the building blocks of what became our modern science. And to talk about one who is risen from the dead, who speaks to us today, who brings us God's love, this was beyond their understanding. It's foolishness. It makes no sense. There is nothing that we have observed in the world that gives any credibility to this kind of proclamation. And there were those who lived in Corinth who thought it was foolish because it makes no sense in the world that we live in. You get up, you eat, you go to work, you have a little fun once in a while, you get with your friends, you eat supper, you go to bed, and that's life. What does God have to do with any of that? What does any religion have to do with us living our life? And so Paul is confronting the early Christians who were caught between being called to be disciples of Christ, which means leading a life that is not dictated by the world, but is dictated by the love of God. They're pulled that way, but they're also being pulled by the world to do what the world thinks is important: power, wealth, influence, security. All the things that we think are important today, the world. To be a Christian, a disciple, may mean risking. It may be looking foolish. It may mean sometimes you don't have the wealth, the power, the security, because to be a disciple of Christ means you're not going to have all those things. And there's Jesus on the mountain. Blessed are you. And all of his blessings are amounting to what says, don't be of the world, but be in the world. Righteousness. Jesus talks a lot about righteousness. We have a tendency to think of righteousness as don't get in trouble, be good, help other people, and that's about it. I've been looking at one of my dad's old journals when he traveled, and when he was a 19-year-old college student, he had an opportunity to travel with an aunt and uncle to study a year abroad in Bristol, England. And they stayed with a Professor Mallett and his family, and they had 3 very attractive daughters. And they invited him to go to a party. And at the party, many of them smoked, and many of them drank, and many of them danced. But according to my dad's journal, he didn't do any of those things. He was a good Methodist back in 1938, and dancing and drinking was considered sinful. So there he was in a tux at a wonderful party, sitting by the wall, not enjoying it. I can just picture it. Sometimes we think of righteousness as these little rules, these little things. Let me tell you, righteousness means a right relationship with God. It rarely has anything to do with drinking or card playing or dancing or fill in the blank of what so-called immorality you want to put there. It has everything to do with how you are in a relationship with God. And what Jesus is giving us, he's pointing us towards understanding that if we're going to follow him, we can't be dictated to by the world. What the world represents, we have to, in a sense, leave behind in order to be a disciple. So where are we in the year 2014? Most of us don't want to be in a place where we're going to appear foolish. Most of us don't want to be in a place that is going to make us on a daily basis, if not weekly, risk something. Our security, our wealth, or risk being made a fool of. Everything we are about here in this place and in most every church in the land is about avoiding risk, avoiding being made a fool, avoiding giving more than you have to keep things afloat or to keep missions in ministry, to avoid anything that's going to cause us to feel embarrassed or threaten the things that we take for granted: wealth, security, power, prestige. And so what has happened over the last 1,000 or so years is the church has become a place where we sit smugly and contentedly and try to avoid any risk or foolishness whatsoever. Do you remember there was a day and time when it depended on your status into the community what church you attended? Oh, to be a part of the in crowd, you had to go to a certain kind of church. You didn't want to go to, as what Joe refers to, one of those chapel folk places. Familiar story, I may have used it before. There was an old fellow named Zeke who was a very pious member of this Methodist church in the community, and he was involved. He was a sainted man, but poor Zeke, he came to church in tatters. Cuffs were frayed, his shirt was frayed. He had a rope that he tied his pants together, and the members of the church say, look, we've got to do something about this for such a good man. And so a couple of the men in the church said, let's take up a collection. They got a lot of money. And one of the members of the church ran a men's store in town. He says, I can fix him up if we can just get him there. And so the money was given to the men's store owner, and it was enough so that, what name did I give him? Zeke. Zeke could have, it's been a while, Zeke could have 2 brand new suits made to order with shirts and ties that would make him look spiffy. And so they got Zeke to the store, and he picked out a couple of suits. Oh, I can't afford this. Zeke, it's been covered. This is a gift for you from your church. Oh, I don't know if I can accept that, but Zeke put on the suit and the shirt and the tie, and he stood, and he liked how he looked. So, all right. So they wrapped him up, and he went home, and all the people in the church were just waiting for next Sunday when Zeke would come in the door, this rough-hewn, bearded, very awful-looking man would come in his new suits, and everyone could go, oh, and feel very good about what they did. Well, the following Sunday came, Zeke didn't show up. I wonder what happened to him. Well, the second Sunday came, Zeke didn't show up. So maybe something's happened to him. So 3 or 4 of the men went Zeke to see him, and there he was sitting in his suit after services. Zeke, where have you been? We've been missing you. He says, I got up Sunday before last, and I put on my new suit, my shirt and tie, and I couldn't help but stand in front of the mirror and admire myself. And I looked so good that I decided to go to the Episcopal church that Sunday. We have made, in the old days, what church you attended something that would shape how you would be received in the community. We have moved away from the church being a gathering of people who are going to risk, who are going to be invested in the discipleship of Jesus Christ. We have left behind those days when we had to hide and be hidden, because to be detected as a Christian could mean your life was in danger. We have left behind those days that we would reach out daily to help one another. We have left behind those days when coming to a church service and worship was something that was going to lower your prestige in the community. Instead, the church has become an extension of the world to make us feel secure, to justify and rationalize our wealth in obtaining of blessings. And we come here week after week after week to be reassured that we're good people and that everything's okay in the end. But what has happened? What has happened is year by year, decade by decade, century by century, the church has become something of the world and is losing or has lost touch with what it was called to be, a place where people could come and testify how God has worked into their life, to testify and share the proclamation that Jesus Christ is Lord. And instead, we come worried that we'll be in a position where we have to share our love and our acceptance of Jesus. We don't want to be laughed at. We don't want to sound like one of those people that knocks on our door and wants to thrust a pamphlet and ask if we are saved. And so we try to even things out. And in doing so, we have lost the fire. And we wonder why no one comes. Not alone. This is churches, not just Methodists, all over the world. We wonder why no one comes. Because we don't offer the risk, the power and the glory of God in Jesus Christ. We don't offer the righteousness, the right relationship of God. Instead, we offer being comfortable, not threatening, wanting to hear messages that make us feel warm and comfortable, not realizing that the comfort we look for can't be received in safety. The comfort we are looking for can only be received as we interact with each other, where we take the risks to reaching out to someone, when we take the risk of maybe giving more than we thought we could afford to make something happen so that the poor will not be poor, the hungry will be fed, so that those who are afflicted will find some means of support because of what we were willing to sacrifice. Here we are in 2014, and Jesus is still calling us. He is still on the mountain, calling us in love. Blessed are you who are reviled because you represent me and love me. You will be accepted by God. We need to get up and stop being so safe and so worldly and become disciples again. Amen.